did you feel about Saturday apart from maybe chilly? Did the same thoughts cross your mind as did mine? Here comes another late horror show equalizer and more dropped points at home. We've been conditioned that way of late. But you know what? This was always going to be a slog. We don't need Picassos right now. We need 3 points, and we got them. And apart from the tactical issues and individual moments in this game, I also want to talk about some of these transfer rumors that have popped up. Some look rather legitimate with some really interesting names and positions attached. Presented by 24/7 Services. I got to tell you, this dry January is dragging on for me. Let's talk Aston Villa 2, Leicester City 1. So nice to have you inside the parlor once again, and I realize that for both Leicester and Villa, that's not the number one derby for each team in the region, but there always has been a connection and a little bit of bite between the two, and certainly you don't want to lose that fixture, but I had forgotten that the last visit by the Foxes to Villa Park was a 4-2 win early in Unai Emery's tenure, and then we have the managerial connections. You'll remember Brian Little and John Gregory leaving Filbert Street under acrimonious circumstances, only to be followed several years later by Martin O'Neill. And incredibly, the last time we did the double over Leicester City was 2004. I know it may not feel like it because we lost a Carabao Cup game at home to Crystal Palace and we've dropped points through late equalizers on a couple of occasions this year. Aston Villa is undefeated in the Premier League at Villa Park since opening day against Arsenal in August. That's very encouraging, and long may that continue because our away form has not been as good. And looking at the absentees in the squad and then the upcoming fixtures, we're going to have to gather all the points we can muster at the Fortress. Before we get into the game itself, how about this rumor linking Aston Villa with Dortmund and Dutch forward Donyell Malen, who turns 27 shortly, so in his absolute prime. This is a guy who has consistently scored in the Bundesliga, the Champions League, and for his country. I can't believe that Dortmund will want to let go a lightning-quick, unpredictable, and consistent type forward at this stage, except for the fact that his contract expires a year from June 2026. And this is me making a big leap here, but I know that Dortmund has always coveted Carney Chukwuemeka, who's now on the market. Are they trying to raise funds to bring Carney in? Because you know what kind of success they've had with young English talent over the years. And that would be doubly great for Villa because we would still have a sell-on clause with that particular player. But that's just me connecting dots. But Malen isn't the only one. You might have seen the audacious proposal with PSG, who apparently love John Duran, that they would send us Randall Kolo Muani and some cash. Now, Muani is older and more established, and he can comfortably play other positions, but Duran's potential is so high, and his valuation surely increases every single week. Now, there's also been plenty of links with defensive players, including right-footed center backs like Antonio Silva at Benfica, just 21. A 21-year-old Brazilian right fullback from Flamengo named Wesley. Yes, can we handle another 21-year-old Brazilian named Wesley at Aston Villa? And then just recently, Celta Vigo's Oscar Mengueza has been linked. He could play center back, but pretty much anywhere else in a defensive position. These are all positions of clear need. We all know that. I said a couple of weeks ago, we have to upgrade Leon Bailey or at least give him competition in the right attacking forward side. Obviously, right-footed fullback, right-footed center back. We were a thin squad before the Torres and McGinn injuries, and we're in the thick of quite a fight for a couple of different objectives, as Unai Emery likes to say. We've also become conditioned from the club to expect departures in order to facilitate maybe 1, 2, or maybe even 3 of those transfers, which would show serious intent. And the big one could be Louis Barry being sold to a championship team. Let's start a bidding war there and get as much as we can for him. But we've also recalled Lewis Dobbin, moved him on from basically West Brom to Norwich. We could be recalling Samuel Illing Jr., and we may be loaning out Jadon Philogene and even Kosta Nedeljkovic. Now to the match, as the Holy Trinity show aims to identify the three key issues or moments that defined Villa 2, Leicester 1. Samir has been hit by that nasty norovirus, which is making its rounds, while Alex Dutton was thrilled the snow held off as he gathered his usual array of excellent footage. Did you know there was a point in this game in the earlier phases where the Foxes had a 71 to 29% possession edge? But that would end up being fleeting, as Aston Villa did take the majority of the stats quite comfortably. And as you hope might happen, but it was very difficult, Villa were able to get into the opposing box and make things happen. And that extra stat turned out to be very dramatic. So dramatic that really the scoreline should have been more comfortable, which is a recurring theme that shall be reviewed again during the course of this program. One of the reasons why I was nervous about this game was because of the absentees that we currently have. Morgan Rogers is becoming more and more integral to what we do. John Duran is always good for a goal, and Pau Torres can unlock games with one ball. But it was the inclusion of Ross Barkley that turned out to be a stroke of genius by Unai Emery when Amadou Onana was available. And we know how Barkley likes to play on the half turn, teasing opponents in before playing around or through them. And in a congested midfield, this was the perfect solution. And I'll be talking more about Ross Barkley in detail later. Major moment, John McGinn's withdrawal. And it's funny how the injury bug just seems to suddenly spread like a virus, doesn't it? And I think the Villa players have been told specifically, if you feel anything uncomfortable, get on the ground and come off, because we don't want a small injury to become a large injury. But unfortunately, this one could be as many as 5 weeks. And it's not the first time that McGinn has had a hamstring issue, and it comes at a terrible time with fixture congestion. And of course, that Celtic Champions League game looming, which you know Meatball was desperate to be part of. Key issue, the in-game management, something I was critical of against Brighton. Jacob Ramsey was the obvious and natural choice to replace John McGinn, and it was great to see JJ get a run in, given that he's been starved of regular football. But you could see he was gaining confidence as the game wore on. He dropped into midfield to collect it more often, ran past people. That was an encouraging performance, especially because of the hand he had in the game-winning goal. But it was the introduction of Emi Buendia and Ian Matson in and around the 76th minute that truly did turn the game, because both brought a spark and Matson brought that little bit more. And I know we've all wondered, what's it going to take for the Dutchman to start more games or get more minutes? It's a very difficult choice because Luca Dean's been one of our best players. Not only does 24/7 Services work round the clock on any project imaginable, residential, commercial, industrial, but they are also the Holy Trinity show's #1 eyeball recruiters. I honestly don't know how Paul Handsaker has time for anything, Villa-related or otherwise. I mean, he's the hardest working man in the UK, outside maybe Howard Webb. He gets up half an hour before he goes to bed. Well, recently, the company had a project in Milton Keynes, and here are the MK Lions. This is a big club. You're only seeing a few of them here, and these guys had no idea the Holy Trinity show existed until 24/7 Services made the introduction. And I find that quite comforting to know that there is an untapped amount of Villa fans out there that have yet to put their eyeballs on this program. Now you know. Welcome aboard, MK Villains. The crew was also in Stoke recently, and this clogged commercial gutter kind of reminds me of my insides after eating nothing but chocolate and cheese for the last month. But it also might be representative of Leon Bailey's goal-scoring exploits. Finally, he got that one. Did he dislodge a cascade of more goals that'll come flowing now? This was a reactive, preventative job that 24/7 Services does for many clients, and it could save this particular enterprise untold dollars down the road. 24/7 Services, committed to customer satisfaction and spreading the Holy Trinity show gospel all across the UK. Tactically speaking, this was just another minefield occasion for Villa at home, as one would expect with a second-from-bottom team facing a Champions League team, and the added component of having that new manager smell still wafting in the Leicester change room. And you and I would have done the exact same thing being second from bottom and going to Villa Park. You would have congested that midfield and clogged up every channel imaginable to make it impossible to slog through. We saw so many circumstances just like this one, especially in the first half, which was ultimately a stalemate, where you literally could have thrown a tarp over all 20 of the outfield players. It was difficult and awful to navigate. While most of us are starting the process of taking down our Christmas tree, Ruud van Nistelrooy was setting his up at Villa Park. And so the options for the boys in claret and blue is to either go around, and Luca Dean and Matty Cash did have some success and made some inroads on the flanks. You could try to go over all of this, and our accurate long ball success was decent, but here's where we miss Pau Torres and Diego Carlos maybe to a lesser extent. Or you can go through, hence the Boubacar Kamara, Ross Barkley. But you notice how difficult it was for Ollie Watkins and Yuri Tielemans to get involved in this game and knit passes together, because it was a very stubborn and organized opponent, and one that I could see clawing its way out of the bottom three, and they're going to have to, because it looks like Ipswich Town has started that process. Shocking issue. There was not one major scandalous refereeing decision in this game. I didn't think it was a penalty on Boubacar Kamara, by the way, so I agreed with Jared Gillette, and don't hate me for this. I actually prefer him as a referee because he tends to lean on letting things go rather than calling every little minor coming together of players. In fact, he played a couple of good advantages, one of which led to a Villa big chance later in the game. And in the wake of John Duran being threatened with further sanctions for kicking a water bottle at Newcastle, I was kind of concerned that Villa might get some kind of slap on the wrist to remind them that speaking out against the FA has its consequences. Unai Emery made his thoughts crystal clear on the Morgan Rogers penalty incident at Forest afterwards, and he was outspoken on the Duran red card process as well after Newcastle, where Damian Vidagani and Monchi, two senior club executives, also shared their thoughts via their social media channels. And we know that the FA does not like to be undermined. But I mean, up until now, Unai Emery hasn't made a peep over refereeing. He's always taken the high road. But of late, the decisions have been glaring, and they may have cost us points, and that affects him and the club, and now he's standing up for himself and pointing out trends in decisions that have been occurring of late. And when you do that, you put a gigantic bullseye on your back. Big issue number 3, ruthlessness required. Revisiting a theme I brought up during the Brighton show just last week, our inability to kill off an opponent when the opportunity arises. Now, the encouraging and cold, hard reality of Aston Villa is, as the team third in the table with the most big chances missed, that means we're creating the chances. If we were to score, on average, just a half goal a game more, or we were to concede a half goal per game less, we would comfortably be in the Champions League places. Combine those two, score half a goal more and concede half a goal less every single game for the rest of the season. Well, we're now title contenders, and Villa supporters will have more of their fingernails left at the end of games. I truly felt bad for Ollie Watkins because on a couple of occasions he could have single-handedly made the game more comfortable for us. I mean, first of all, he leaves the ball short for Tyrone Mings at 1-0 up, and in this area of the park, we just look so vulnerable. How many times have we seen Villa turn the ball over around here and get punished for it? And although I'm very confident in the Konza-Mings partnership, in fact, they did not lose a single duel, both in the air and on the ground. Man, do these two guys need a clean sheet. And historically speaking, the trip to Goodison Park offers a pretty good chance for that to happen. Later, though, Ollie Watkins has a glorious chance to ice it. And here's where you see a player who's not 100% sharp, snatching at something, electing for power and impulsion over placement, and unfortunately his left foot just has not been as lethal of late. In fact, this is such a similar chance to the one he had against Brighton late in that game when he skies it over the bar after a corner. Incredible how close Leon Bailey came to scoring the insurance goal before this, and then just after, Emi Buendia could have really announced his return in style by burying it, but alas, these are the chances that when they go begging lead to stress at the other end when a team is piling on the pressure. Big issue number 2, brilliant Barkley. As I mentioned earlier, this was a shrewd selection on the day, and here's where analyzing an opponent carefully leads you to certain decisions on where the strengths and the weaknesses are. And the analytics team clearly saw a very tactical game, a tight game in midfield, and that led to the selection. We needed more craft, more guile, more nous than maybe brawn or physicality, which Amadou Onana would have probably brought to the table. Now, if you had told me that halfway through the season, Ross Barkley would have contributed 3 Premier League goals and a huge game winner away in Champions League at Leipzig, I would have been pleasantly surprised, because after our 2 strikers and Morgan Rogers, Ross Barkley is the next biggest goal contributor in this team, and boy, did he uncork a pile driver. The goal came after a corner. Well done, Alex Dutton, for rolling the whole way, and after a series of possession changes, Villa's press led to some risky outballs, and fair play to Ross Barkley and other Villa players for manning their channel, and the ball just came back to Ross. And man, the first touch sets up the second, but he absolutely unleashes a rocket from 19 yards out that leaves the goalkeeper with no chance whatsoever. And this was on top of 10 recoveries and 80% of his ground duels won. Talk about a midfield performance. And I thought Boubacar Kamara was exceptional on the day, and apparently he's close to a contract extension. But Ross Barkley added that little bit more. He added bottom line. And the number 1 big moment that defined Villa 2, Leicester 1, Bailey breakthrough. Here's one of several Aston Villa forward-like players, including John McGinn, Yuri Tielemans, Jacob Ramsey, and Emi Buendia, who had yet to find the twine this season, suddenly deliver the goods when it mattered the most, and when it looked like we had chucked away a lead and were destined for another stalemate at Villa Park. And isn't it interesting that this goal came at a time when all these Malen rumors were starting to circulate? And you know, Leon Bailey was not having the best game. He coughed up the ball numerous times, and I counted several occasions where the attack broke down with him. And here's where the Ian Matson sub would prove pivotal, because he does such a great job to read and then break on the defender and pinch the ball without giving away a foul. That's the key to this whole thing. Then what a cute combination with Jacob Ramsey. Let's see more of that in the second half of the season, please. And Leon Bailey makes the break at the perfect time, and in it goes. And how big will that goal be? Not just in securing an extra 2 points in this game, but for Leon Bailey's confidence going forward, and him clanging the ball off where the upright meets the crossbar is a great example of how, even in the game, his confidence grew. The Sill Hill Brewery star performer is Ross Barkley. Not only did he have the initial breakthrough, but a fantastic statistical afternoon. 98% passing completion percentage in a congested, awful midfield. He was 3 for 3 on successful dribbles and 2 for 2 on accurate long balls. And he seemed to announce the impending birth of a child with his lovely partner, Catherine Pilkington. So it's just all coming up Ross Barkley right now. And I'm going to pour Ross and toast him with a Sill Hill North Star hopped porter, which is exactly what Darren and Bronwyn Andrew were draining at the tap room prior to the game. And Dirk Washington, another Sill Hill enjoyer who introduced me to the brewery, was also in the house shivering away in the North Stand. You know me. I love to associate myself and this show with hardworking, high-quality local companies who don't charge their clients an arm and a leg like Sill Hill Brewery and 24/7 Services. And I love it even more when you support them, which you can do this Friday as, of course, West Ham comes to town in the 150th anniversary game. The tap room opens at noon. The Villa Park record improved to start the new year off right, and we scored the first goal. Still can't earn a clean sheet to save our lives. I mean, we've had fewer clean sheets than the norovirus ward at the hospital, but at least we didn't concede early or late. In fact, Leon Bailey's goal in the 76th minute meant that we actually improved on our final 15-minute plus-minus, where, unfortunately, Aston Villa has the worst record in the Premier League of conceding goals. And now a quick diversion from the Premier League in the form of the FA Cup Round 3, with a very beleaguered West Ham United team coming to Villa Park, and that terrifies me. They're coming off a 4-1 loss to Manchester City over the weekend, but you'll recall the last very beleaguered team from London that played us at Villa Park in a cup game was Crystal Palace, and they left with the spoils. I would also suggest that perhaps it's the Hammers who could benefit more from a good cup run in this competition, whereas Aston Villa, I'm sorry, they have other priorities. Getting back into the Champions League places and staying in the Champions League top 8 is a club priority in order that they may not have to unload assets because of PSR compliance. And then when you look at our schedule, the final ever visit to Goodison Park the following Wednesday, whereas West Ham is hosting Fulham the following Tuesday. It will be very interesting to see, priority-wise, how much rotation is employed by the respective managers. If you think Villa is finally going to take this competition seriously and start a full-fledged Premier League-like lineup, oh, I've got news for you because I've seen this movie too many times. And luckily, we will have Morgan Rogers, you'd expect to start. After that, though, will Diego Carlos be fit enough to play? I'm sure we'll see Onana, maybe even Ross Barkley to give Yuri Tielemans a rest. No McGinn, does that mean Jacob Ramsey, or will Ian Matson play higher up the field? Who knows? But I do expect that unless he moves back home to Sweden between now and then, Robin Olsen is probably going to start this game. You have to think at some point there's going to be a backup goalkeeper playing. A lot of people remarked to me afterwards, it wasn't pretty, but we got the job done, and we have to keep reminding ourselves that the Premier League is a terrible, horrible minefield, and there's going to be a lot of topsy-turvy results, upsets, and a lot of movement within the table, especially that middle part between now and May. And the most important thing is just keep collecting points. I'm not interested in aesthetics right now. I don't need to see a Manchester United at Liverpool type game like on Sunday. No thanks. Just keep grinding away between now and May, and hopefully not lose any more players to injury. Thank you as always for watching, and until the FA Cup game, you know the drill. Up the mighty Villa.